Oh my god, when Game Freak promised something new for Pokemon X and Y, I thought they'd just add some sort of crazy multicolored Pokemon that spits melted cheese at racist people. But damn boy, someone somewhere kept themselves very busy, because Pokemon X and Y are both games just bursting with tweaks and better interfaces and keyring Pokemon. There's in fact so much stuff going on that I've decided to focus on the new Pokemon introduced, for now at least. There wasn't as many new ones as in previous generations, but overall, the new batch of Pokemon are at the very least interesting concepts. So let's get a couple of ground rules out the way. That funny misspelling of the word favourite in the title is there to indicate that this is a list constructed by pure nougaty opinion. I couldn't care less about the super competitive aspect of Pokemon, so number 1 will not be the absolute technical best Pokemon from X and Y. Just one that I like more than the others. Funny how that works, you know? Also, no Mega Evolutions. Mega Evolutions are a nice addition, but they are an extra form to an existing Pokemon, and so they're technically not a new Pokemon. You know, it's quite simple really. When it was finally announced that the brand spanking new type being introduced was to be the elusive Fairy type, the amount of fucks I gave could be measured on a non-existent ruler. I don't know, they just didn't seem like an absolutely necessary addition to the series. Like, what Pokemon ideas could you have other than like friggin' Tinkerbell or something? And then in strolls Florges. Think of this thing like a fairy type Gardevoir with really beefy special defense. It stands in a class of not many as a fairy type Pokemon I actively used when playing through the game. And it's mostly because of how it can just sit there in battle and take so much shit and still be able to hit back with some force. The best thing about fairy Pokemon is the resistances and the types that it's super effective against. So not only is Florges a very strong special Pokemon, it's resistant to 3 very common types, super effective against 3 overused types, and can't even be hit by the biggest kahuna of them all. The point is that Florges is really well adapted to the new strategy that comes with fairy Pokemon, while still being a Pokemon with an interesting design and colourful different forms. I mean, not as good as Gardevoir overall, but still a great addition to the series. So it's time to choose a fossil to restore and have as a Pokemon to take through the game with you. Are you going to choose A, the Jaw fossil, or B, the Sail fossil? Is this a trick question? Sure, Aurorus might be a somewhat decent Pokemon, and Amaura looks really adorable, but have a look at this guy. I could write a couple of words to describe Tyrantrum. Words like terrifying, intimidating, menacing, different variations on awesome. But I'm gonna play it a little safe and just stick with really fucking badass. The typing is a dead giveaway. A rock dragon Pokemon just oozes power and lots of it, something that's reflected in its Pokédex entry, stating that it was pretty much invincible in the ancient world because nothing could match up to it. Of course, in the world of Pokemon there's ice, dragon, fighting, and basically a lot of types that can destroy it, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a lot of fun in the process. Tyrantrum isn't a horrendously complicated Pokemon, but the satisfaction levels are just through the roof and into the fucking clouds. It's pretty much a case of using the strategy of, I'ma hit this dude really hard and see what happens. The sort of thing you'd expect from a T-Rex Pokemon. Those guys didn't have the biggest of brains or longest arms. From one Dragon-type Pokemon to the next, Goodra has formed its own little fan base. It probably has something to do with what it evolves from. You gotta know that you're onto a great Pokemon design when Bulbapedia describes it as a light, purple, vaguely slug-like pile of goo. And it only gets better from there, because Goodra has a ton of substance to back up its unusual appearance. I guess you could probably compare it to Florges, but with higher overall stats and a gooey dragon rather than a flower fairy. Goodra is a great big dragon-shaped wall for special attackers, but like Florges, it has enough firepower to give any opponents a rough time. Coupled with some fancy abilities and an impressive moveset, and Goodra suddenly stops being a blob of jelly and starts being a serious threat. It doesn't quite hit the heights of some of the other crazy powerful dragons in other generations, but it does manage to carve a little niche for itself. And besides, you'll want to train one up if you end up stumbling across the first form. Just take that in for a moment. It's a fucking blob of purple goo, which happens to turn into a funky goo dragon thing. Aw, Game Freak, never stop being so creative. The common Pancham is a docile creature by design. He does not look for a fight, but he is well equipped to fend off any foes that stray into his territory. Perhaps it would be too harsh to label it a violent Pokemon, but it will act if it feels threatened by an intruder. Away from fighting, Pancham is far more docile and spends its time standing there with a leaf hanging out of its mouth, looking pretty swish. During its life, Pancham will never be taken away from its largely relaxed lifestyle. Evolution! Oh god, what's happening? Pancham's behaviour has changed drastically. Gone is the lackadaisical lifestyle of the adorable Pancham, and in its place is the brutally cruel actions of Pangoro. The world is no longer safe. Prepare Uranus. Pangoro is coming to wreck your shit. You know, by the time I got to Snowbelle City and the final gym in the game, I thought that I'd seen the best of what Kalos had to throw at me. And, you know, you probably expect that. You've only got one gym leader, the Elite Four, and the champion to go. So you'd hope that most of the best Pokemon in the game had already shown their hand. But the Snowbelle gym had one last trick up its sleeve. Wulfric, the city's gym leader, ended off with an Avalugg. I didn't catch a Bergmite during my run through the game, and so this evolution line remained completely unknown to me. And the simple fact that I didn't one-shot Avalugg was enough to convince me that this was a damn good Pokemon. The guy is a tank in all sense of the word. Not just a hulking great mass that soaks up damage, but also with a hefty thread of strength coursing through those icy veins. It's a very physical Pokemon, focusing on huge defenses and surprisingly competent attack power. Something that really sticks out is its design. There's something fantastic about how jagged and angular Avalugg is. Really hitting home the whole icy, spiky, and generally quite, cool thing. Also, Bulbapedia seems to think that he's based off an aircraft carrier. The guy's only a tad over 6 foot tall, so we're talking like really small airplanes here. Like those little toy ones you might have had as a kid. You know, that'll probably work. Oh my fucking god. Why hasn't there been a flying Mexican wrestler Pokemon before? I mean, it just makes way too much sense. Hawlucha stands as one of the weirder designs from Gen 6, but not in the same way as something like Goodra, where you might like it because it's just a little bit stupid. The first ever flying fighting type Pokemon is dripping in swagger, and yet he's got more substance than this gimmick would have you to believe. In keeping with the whole flying Mexican wrestler because why the fuck not theme, Hawlucha leans heavily on speed and attack, turning him into a very effective sweeper, with a great typing and an attack stat that just keeps on rising if you give him moves like Swords Dance and Power Up Punch. To be honest, there are better Pokemon designs and concepts later on in this video, but do you care? When you have so many Pokemon based off of real life animals and mythological creatures, or keyrings, Hawlucha sticks out like a gloriously colourful thumb. Embrace the Mexican mentality, get a Hawlucha today, amigo. What? If you are offended by any events in this short segment feel that you are complaining, I'm reminded to tell you that this is a comedy and not designed to be representative of any individual or group of people. That's fine, just fuck out, enjoy the video. I gotta be honest here, I may have chosen Chespin as a starter, but I can confirm now that I wholly regret that decision. It's not because Chespin and its evolutions are bad Pokemon, it's more because of what you get with the other two starter Pokemon. I could have gone for Firefox that turns into some sort of Fire Mage, or I could have opted for a fucking Water Ninja. Let's start with the name on this bad boy, frigging Greninja. Just let that sink in for a moment, Greninja. Just saying it sets a precedent of what this guy is all about. And you get an even better idea when you see what it looks like. That posture exudes a certain amount of coolness and is also a tiny bit intimidating. This frog ninja ain't gonna fuck about with you now. I also like how that scarf he's wearing is actually his crazy long frog tongue wrapped around his own neck. You know, like a normal frog. Then we've got its unique ability, Protein. Think Kecleon's colour change with added goodies and you're not far wrong. As you use an attack, Greninja's type will change to the same type as that move, and as a result, it will always get a stab bonus and do more damage. Combining this with high special attack and speed, and it's a devastating combination capable of ripping through teams while proving surprisingly difficult to knock out. Greninja stands as my favourite starter Pokemon for quite a number of years, very well suited to so many different situations, and with enough muscle to make it a viable attacking option, rather than some stupid gimmick Pokemon that no one's actually going to use. But of course, I chose Chespin, so what do I know? Following on from Gen 5, where Unova introduced approximately 3,500 new legendary Pokemon, Kalos offered onto the world just 3. I mean, I'm not complaining too much because some of the Unova legendaries seemed a little redundant after a while, and we are due to have 3 more Kalos legendaries whenever Game Freak gets its act together and organises the events, but that's a big difference when you think about it. However, with the exception of Zygarde, which smacks as a big bag of no, what we got here was sheer quality over quantity. To such an extent that I can't actually split Xerneas and Yveltal. They are 2 Pokemon that oppose each other very well. We've got the creator of stuff and generally nice stag thing, Xerneas, and then the holy shit, let's raise everything to the ground in Yveltal. Good versus evil, fairy type versus dark type. It's all the symbolism you'd probably expect. I guess Xerneas in particular stands out for obviously being the first legendary fairy type Pokemon, but it's also extremely potent and the strongest fairy type Pokemon to date. Not to say that Yveltal isn't strong too, it might in fact be stronger, but it is good to see that Game Freak are fully committed to making fairy type Pokemon seem as far removed from gimmicky as possible. The designs are also worth a mention. Both Pokemon are based off creatures from Norse mythology, and while they may get their appearances from such origins, you gotta say that Rainbow Stag and Dark Death Dealing Eagle here have an essence of awe about them. With Yveltal being based off of Hrassvegler, and Xerneas based off of Eichbrunrur, and oh come on guys, these 2 legendaries have very well built up origins. I mean, I guess that gives some sort of explanation behind Zygarde, the guy hiding in a cave and watching all the action unfold in front of him. I think the technical term is voyeur, but Zygarde will do. As a Pokemon used for competitive play, Malamar is utter garbage. The Dark Psychic typing's kinda funky, but the thing's frail like hell. I know you can do like some sort of magic trick if it's got Contrary as an ability and spam something like Superpower, but as a base, it's fairly terrible. The reason why Malamar is this high though, is the concept behind it. I'll be honest, this was the first Pokemon that got me genuinely excited for Gen 6, and that's because of how many extra features come with this guy. Let's start with Inkay, the pre-evolution. When it evolves, the whole design of the Pokemon literally flips upside down, and we get Malamar, some sort of inverted squid Cthulhu monster. This is more important than you think, because the notion of upside down is something that this Pokemon absolutely feeds on. You see, Malamar is endlessly symbolic. Let's go back to that typing, Dark and Psychic, 2 very different and frankly opposing types. As such, the method to actually get a Malamar is suitably insane. Past level 30, you can get yourself a Malamar by, you might have guessed it, holding your 3DS upside down as you gain a level with Inkay. Oh yeah, not only are you getting a really unique Pokemon, but you look really dumb while doing it. They should do something like that for Voltorb and Electrode, at least then will Electrode make a bit of sense. Go on, have a guess. There's one Pokemon I've left out of this video until now, and for a couple of really damn good reasons. Don't tell me you didn't see this one coming, but number 1 is Aegislash. Oh boy, this is gonna be fun, partly because I have no idea how to say his name. There is a ton to talk about with this guy, so give me a second or two to break it down for all y'all. In a generation that brought us unique typing after unique typing, Aegislash and its Ghost Steel combo stand out as, at the very least, an intriguing prospect. Steel-type Pokemon might not be as unflappable as in the past, but it's still the best defensive typing in the franchise. Whack Ghost onto that as well, and you've got an effective method of hitting back with a fair amount of force. And you'd be surprised how well the 2 complement each other. Aegislash's big gimmick is its ability, Stance Change. With this, you've pretty much got 2 Pokemon in one, being able to swap between impenetrable defenses and sensational counterattacks. You can sit there in Shield form, boost up and weaken your opponent with King Shield, a much improved version of Protect, and then turn the table, switch to Sword form and blow your opponent straight out of the water. With stats that change to accompany each form, it's the perfect tactical game. And as one final very delicious cherry on top, Let's take a look at Aegislash's concept and design. I'm genuinely a little surprised that it took so long for a place like Japan to bring out a possessed sword Pokemon. And it may have taken 15 years, but my god was it worth the wait. This has been rabbidluigi, and if there were any fears that Gen 6 might have been a flop with regards to how the Pokemon might look or how they'd fight, surely those fears are out to rest now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.
Every one of you watching this screen, look out! Because soon, very soon, the most horrifying monster menace ever conceived will be oozing into this theater. How can it be stopped? Mob hysteria sweeps one city. Before long, the world could fall before the blood-curdling threat of the Blob.